moral of the 7. George doesn't want to name anybody by a regular human name. Has to name them soda, barbecue sauce, 7. I think barbecue sauce was what I meant. But basically, he just had like a horrible taste with picking out names in the episode called The 7. Which was a fine episode. It wasn't one that stood out to me too much, but, you know, I remembered it a little bit. There was a couple on this disc, like the next one, which was a 2-parter, and then some with the Doll and the Friars Club, but we had to start off with The 7. So The 7. So the story behind it is George and Susan go out to dinner with Susan's cousin, Carrie, and her husband, Ken. Carrie is due any day with a little girl. And they're talking about names. And of course, George, who is just like, anytime he's around a group of people that's not his friends, he's always just like completely out of the conversation, just wants to talk about what he wants to talk about. So he's decided he starts saying something about how, like, you know, he'll be the cousin also, but they said, no, you're not a cousin by blood or whatnot. And then he starts hearing out what everything about the names. Pamela, Joan, Kimberly, I think it was, a couple other ones. George just downed all of them. He then tells them a name they should use, Soda. And no one was crazy about Soda. And then him and Susan got in like an argument about it later. And George mentioned the name he'd like to have for his first child, 7. 7 Costanza. 7 Costanza. After Mickey Mantle. Susan, of course, dislikes the name. Jerry was making fun of him the next day, basically saying stuff about how he was calling him out, saying, you know, how about Mug? Or, you know, Maxwell's, whatever it was. Basically, it's taking every single, like, you know, object or food product in his apartment and basically saying, you know, oh, we can name it this, name it that. And, of course, George got annoyed by it. Then, of course, you know, he later tried to compromise with Susan about Mickey, but she didn't like that either. But then George finds out Carrie and Ken heard about 7. They like the name 7. So then George, of course, is just going out of his way to stop them from using the name 7. Going as far as going to their apartment, and right before Carrie goes in, right when Carrie's going into labor, basically saying you can do anything else. You can do 6, you can do 14, you can do 11. But they were saying, we like 7, you know, and George was begging him and says, no, that's my name. You're stealing my name. He even went with them in the car to the hospital and begging them not to use the name. But of course they kept ignoring them. But of course it's like, George, out of the way, we gotta get her into the hospital. Even of course they were going down the hallways with her on the stretcher or whatnot, getting her ready to go into the room to give birth to the baby. And of course they didn't let George go any further, and when they said where the family's allowed, and George was like, no, I'm sleeping with the cousin, 7. Like his dreams are like dying and just crushed inside, because this name that he thinks was all his is getting ripped away from him. It's like, 7, no. And then, of course, she does give birth to the baby, and there was a deleted scene where they show them all sitting outside, and everybody's praising, like, look at 7. Oh, everybody loves 7. Whatnot. George was like, I need air, and he walks away, as he was just not pleased at all whatsoever. That was really the main story where 7 came from. The other stories were, first off, Jerry, well, at the beginning of the episode, I bounced around a lot. But Jerry and Elaine were at an antique store. Elaine sees this bike that Elaine sees this bike she really likes, which apparently was the same bike used in an episode of Friends that Ross had bought Phoebe for to ride a bike. But of course, Phoebe, even though she liked the bike, had no clue how to actually ride it. She would be walking around with the bike instead of actually riding it. But Jerry, though, was distracted by a beautiful woman. Her name was Christy, in this really nice dress. And basically, Elaine, off of Jerry, you know, not just pushed off to the side, Elaine falls and gets hurt with the bike and hurts her neck. And Elaine has this bad neck. And So Kramer had apparently was in the room later in the episode. They were talking, and then Elaine says something like, I'd give anyone that bike of who can fix my neck. Well, Kramer then knew a few tricks. He did something with her neck and it worked. But then Kramer wanted the bike. And Elaine was like, she wasn't being serious about, giving that bike away. But then Jerry's like, oh no, he wants that bike. So then there was a rivalry between Elaine and Kramer about the bike. Finally, Elaine gave in and gave Kramer the bike. However, a couple nights later, Elaine sat up in the middle of the night. You heard her crackling again. Her neck, was all stuck again. She was like this. She's walking down the street, and she ran to Jerry's girlfriend, which we'll come back to that scene in a little bit. And she basically wanted to get revenge on Kramer because it didn't work, and she wants her bike back. So, of course, Jerry didn't want to get involved, so they sent him to a neutral source, which happened to be Newman. So, of course, Newman was like, kind of being the judge, hearing out both sides of the story. He thought, Newman thought they both had good arguments. So, at first, they wanted to cut the bike in half. And then, of course, they went back and forth. And finally, it was settled that Kramer got the bike. But, of course, Kramer eventually sold it to Newman because of another story that Kramer had in this episode. There was a lot of small stories in the episode with people. Some people had multiple stories. Like George only had one. Jerry was involved with Elaine. He was involved with his own story, and he was also involved with Kramer's. Kramer, I guess Jerry and Kramer started having this discussion about this whole thing about what's mine is yours. Well, then Kramer then decided, hey, he put like a jar there. And he basically had to write down, what all he took. Like a cupcake, wrote it down, he'll pay Jerry back for that cupcake, even though Kramer's not really worked in how long. But then it started getting a little weird because Kramer started, drinking half of a can of pop. And Jerry, Jerry's like, that doesn't count. A half a can of pop is a whole can of pop. You can't eat like one bite of an apple and expect to pay a partial of it. So, of course, that, got out of hand. It was kind of a crazy, distraction story somewhat. But basically, Kramer sold Newman the bike because Kramer needed the money to pay back Jerry. And of course, Elaine chased down Newman at the end of the episode and wanted the bike. And Jerry's story was, of course, he met Christy at the antique store. Beautiful woman, they got along very well. They go out on their first date. She's wearing the same dress that he's seen her in 3 days later at the antique store, which Jerry seems a little confused about. And of course, him and George had this discussion about well, it was similar. It made me think of the Good Samaritan episode whenever they're saying how the Robin Sandusky was off with her sneezes, which is why the husband didn't say God bless you and whatnot. They had the same discussion here, except maybe she has her cycles or whatnot, or maybe she just on a different route with her laundry or whatnot. Anyways, though, so then of course Jerry's trying to figure out what's going on here. And so then Elaine, when Elaine was walking back to the apartment to confront Kramer about her neck being bad again, she saw Christy, but her head was up. She couldn't see what Christy was wearing, and Jerry was just obsessing over the fact that does Christy ever wear anything else besides that one dress? So they went out on another date, and then I guess while they were there, she accidentally spilled wine on her dress. So she goes back to her apartment, and while Jerry's waiting, he sees in another picture, again, she was wearing that same dress. So he's like, this girl ever changed? So she had a robe on, and instead of going to the movies, she says a call tonight. And then Jerry's like, no, let's go out. You're wearing something different. And then it leads to just her being completely turned off, and she breaks up with Jerry. And the deleted scene at the end of the episode, after George walks away, Jerry sees Christy, and he goes chase at her trying to see what she's wearing, because he's just obsessed with the fact that she wears the same dress every time he sees her. She doesn't change or whatnot. So yeah, a lot of the 7 was an okay episode. Some people had like Jerry, Kramer, Elaine all had multiple stories. There were some. Well, Elaine only one. Jerry, though, had like a lot of stories he was involved with. Like he got jumbled around. So it was okay. It's not my favorite in season 7 for sure. I mean, there's definitely a couple coming up that I really enjoyed, but it was okay. But 7 Costanza. The idea of 7 actually came from the middle name of both David Beckham's daughter, Harper, and Brett Seabrook's son, Carter. And it really was inspired by this episode the name was inspired by this episode. There's just a lot of things about the number 7 that was between, everybody in the series. What also was intriguing too was that in the scene, in the first scene in his apartment, Wayne Knight was actually wearing a wedding ring. It was never seen, of course, after that, but Knight was married to Paula Suter at the time, and he forgot to take the ring off during the filming. But, of course, it wasn't seen after that, but, it was just, a little bit of like an error right there. But, yep, that's the 7. So we don't get a 7 Costanza, we get a 7, whatever Ken and Carrie's last name are, Susan's cousins. Who knows? But yeah, that's my thoughts on the 7. What are your guys' thoughts on the 7 episode? Make sure your thoughts down in the comments section below. Be sure as always to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel. Follow me on Twitter at DemandAirBody3. And next time I am here, guys, next 2 episodes will be a 2-part episode of the Cadillac, which is also another pretty good episode. I do enjoy a couple good stories from that episode. So we'll talk about that next. So once again, guys, slap a like on the video. Subscribe for more content on my channel. Follow me on Twitter as well at DemandAir183. And until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch you all later. Have a great rest of your night. Peace out, everybody.